Hello, and welcome to Model Aviation Live. I'm your host, Jay Smith, and I'm really excited to be with you today. I've got sort of a birthday present today. My birthday's actually on Sunday, so this present's a little early. But my guest today on the show is Peter Albin, and he is the bass player for Big Brother and the Holding Company. But before we bring him out and we ask him some questions, let me explain how I got to know Peter, and it's kind of an interesting story. So there's several people who play music, play musical instruments that work at AMA, and then there's several members who play music. So I wanted to kind of showcase that. So back in August of 2016, I wrote an article called Modelers and Musicians. And our own Matt Ruddick, which you can see the cover there, that's Matt sitting on the Model Aviation logo playing his acoustic guitar. And as you know, Matt is one of the hosts of AMA Air, and he's also kind of in the background helping with the show today. So I did an article in August 2016. It was called Modelers and Musicians. And then the subheading of the article, I thought it was kind of a play off the popular song, Play That Funky Music. So the subhead of the article was Play That Funky Music, Flyboy. And I shared the stories of several musicians, some who are famous and some who do it more like me as a hobby. So, people like Hoot Gibson, 5-time space shuttle astronaut, 4 times as the commander. He's also won the unlimited class at the Reno Air Races. We featured him. I talked about Roy Orbison, who was a modeler up until he passed away. Chuck Garrick, the bass player, Alice Cooper, is a bass player and modeler. You have the drummer, Frank Beard of ZZ Top. I mean, just so many musicians. We have our own Jeff Troy, who was the editor of Park Pilot and still writes for Park Pilot. He's toured with Chubby Checker, and he's been in bands from the 60s. So I just thought it would be interesting to share that story. So I did this article called Modelers and Musicians in the August 2016 Model Aviation. You can go back and check it out if you go to modelaviation.com/digital. And after that article came out, I received an email from Peter Albin, and he shared with me that he was a free flighter. And Peter Albin, as I said, he's the bass player, founding member of Big Brother and the Holding Company, which is the band that Janis Joplin was in for a lot of her career. And they put out 2 albums with Janis, Big Brother did. So I asked Peter back then if I could interview him for the back page for I Am the AMA. So in January 2017, there was an article that I interviewed Peter about his air modeling and a little bit about music. And interestingly enough, in November of last year, almost a year ago, Brian Bassett, the gentleman who helped write and played guitar on Play That Funky Music, he actually came to a local music store to promote a line of guitars. So I actually got to meet him and get his autograph and get a picture with him. So there I am with Brian Bassett. And I showed him the article and gave him the issue of Model Aviation, and he thought it was, pretty funny that I called it, Play That Funky Music, Flyboy. And so he signed a pick guard for me from a Fender Stratocaster, which is the guitar he wrote the song Play That Funky Music on. So it was really neat to meet him. And I've had the opportunity to meet a few of the musicians who are also air modelers. So when this show came about a few months back, when we started Model Aviation Live, I really wanted to ask Peter to come on and be able to talk to him even further, more in depth than we did with I Am the AMA. So, if you are familiar at all with Janis Joplin and Big Brother, he really needs no introduction. The gentleman, not only has he recorded with, Janis Joplin, but he's played music with Jerry Garcia and was great friends with the Grateful Dead. He played the Monterey Pop Festival in 1967. He shared the stage with The Who and Jimi Hendrix, who famously burned his guitar at that gig. So I'm really excited to have him join us and talk to us a little bit about his free flight career and also talk to us about music. And if you have any questions as you're watching live, please comment and I'll be happy to share those. So let's bring Peter out and talk to him. Hi, Peter.
Hi, y'all. How you doing?
Thanks so much for joining us. We're really cold here today in Indiana. I shared with you earlier, it's 34, and I know you're out in California, and it's pretty warm.
It's sunny and hot.
Right.
That's California for you.
So let's jump in first to your aero modeling career. But before we do, let me ask you, for you, Peter, was it music and playing music came first, or was it aero modeling? Which one was first?
Music.
It was music.
Yeah. And in the elementary schools, you could take a lesson on various instruments. So I started out trying to play violin.
Okay.
And
And
later on, I got more into playing my ukulele, and then from there to guitar.
excellent. You know, I just got a ukulele, and it's actually a Grateful Dead ukulele. Um,
Wow.
yeah, it's just in the other room. I haven't really figured it all out yet because I'd never played one. But I think it was Musician's Friend had them on sale. They were normally 129, and it was like 74.99. And I thought, well, you know, if nothing else, it's good at wall art. But I've been trying to learn to play it, and actually, somebody named Tom Wagner just said me too. So apparently, he also has the Grateful Dead ukulele. I think they have four different, you know, different graphics, but they're all Grateful Dead. And so let's touch base a little bit about your aero modeling career, and then we'll dive into the rest of the music. So when I interviewed you for I Am the AMA, you know, you'd shared obviously that you were really into free flight and specifically into World War One models. So tell us a little bit about how you got into aero modeling.
Well, really, I got into it by uh, watching my brother build. He built a couple of control line models back in the 50s. And then he went to building boats. When I was about 13, I tried building stick and tissue models and was kind of successful at it. But that's when I started basically as a teenager. I didn't do too much of it when I was in high school. I started more directing more of my energies into playing guitar, learning songs, and I was part of the high school choir, a cappella choir. And at that same time, my brother and I started a group, and it later involved. It became known as the Liberty Hill Aristocrats, and it had various people over the years in and out of the group. David Nelson from New Riders of the Purple Sage, and Ron McKernan or Pigpen from the Grateful Dead, Ellen Kavanaugh, Ted Clare, Mike Riggs, a whole bunch of different musicians that went through it, and it evolved. And at one point, I had to drop out, so it became the new Liberty Hill Aristocrats with somebody replacing me. So it was okay, but I started playing more pop music when I was in high school. It seemed to be just more of the thing to do a little bit, but folk music was still like an in thing, you know, the Kingston Trio and the Gateway Singers and you know, a lot of pop folk groups doing that. So that's how I kind of got involved in the folk music thing. And then we got into like playing really old ethnic, you know, old timey songs. They're called basically stuff from the 20s and the 30s. Boil them cabbage down, boys. The Hungry Hash House Hotel where I live. Um, Songs like that. And we did some contemporary folk songs also.
So with your getting involved in free flight, you mentioned that you really were interested in World War One. What led to your interest in modeling World War One?
That's a good question. I don't know. It just seemed like an era that involved these airplanes that had really been developed in a short period of time to be extremely fast, extremely maneuverable, and dangerous, and quite, I don't know, just interesting looking. You know, the lozenge uh, paint jobs, you know, the insignias of skulls and the storks and whatever. Um, no, they just like had an air about them. You know, this And of course, again, the pilots, and all the people involved. It just was like, it was like World War One is like only less than 10 years from the first flight of the Wright brothers. Incredible.
Yes.
The advancements was unbelievable.
Well, as it turns out, I'm a huge World War One modeler, and you can't see it, but literally, if it fell, it would hit me in the head. I have a 1/6 scale Sopwith pup right above my head, and then you can see behind me. You can see the cross there. I have that's an Eindecker, a 60 size Eindecker behind me. So you don't have to sell it to me, Peter. I love flying World War One. I mean, just the wind in the wires, as they say. It just amazes me. So it's my favorite thing to model. So we've got a question. Tom Wagner says, why free flight over RC?
Well, I did try RC, and I have not been very good at it. I like the fact that an airplane, if it's well built and balanced correctly and trimmed correctly, can fly by itself. It's unbelievable to be able to see a plane just go up and up and up. And I've had planes go up and up and up and out of sight.
Oh, yeah.
I forgot to, do the thermalizer.
Right.
But, even small planes. And I taught at a school, basically, the 3 R's as an assistant for a short time. And the school was the San Geronimo Valley School, who had a Guinness World Record flight of a paper airplane. It like went over 100 yards. Unbelievable. Wow. And that's, and I taught a little bit of free flight to a couple different groups of students in the mid 70s, and because it's a little easier for kids to get into it. I mean, yeah, I guess it's easy to buy an ARF, and give it to your son, and he can fly it the next day. But I don't know. I like the fact that there's some skills involved in free flight. If you're building it, and most free flights are built by the owner.
So we got a question. George Breedhoff says, are you still active in free flight?
Not very. The problem is I like to fly indoors, and our indoor site, which was a basketball court at a religious school, got taken over by various groups of basketball players, seniors, juniors, whatever. So we just couldn't, it was not available to us anymore. We've looked, and it's really hard to find a good indoor site here in the Bay Area.
So we talked a little bit about your World War models. And if I glance over this way, it's because I've written some questions and I want to make sure I touch on them. So did you ever compete in free flight competition, or was it always just for fun, Peter?
Just a little bit. Yeah, I didn't do too well, but a couple of trophies, a couple of plaques. I had a friend named Paul Stober, who was really into it, really into competition. And he had a design called the Strong Arm, because he was a weightlifter. And he had gotten into it in the 50s. And built his own designs that really flew quite well. Both, I think it was B, C, and D, free flight gas. So a couple times I've been down to Taft, to the World Championships down there, which are no longer there at Taft. They're close by, but and it's a long ways to drive. And you had to camp out, and because almost all the motel rooms were gone, but by the time we got down there, you didn't think ahead. And it was really hot, and they were just dust devils. I mean, I couldn't believe there's these huge gas cans that were like garbage cans, just stuffed with models that had broken because they had been lifted up by these dust devils and just twirled around and smashed to the ground. But there was a lot of regular lift there too, so guys were getting maxes, which was incredible. And I had a great time, and I even had an experience of seeing some of these wonderful modelers. I timed for Sal Taby, and Joe Ott, I think, was there, and I can't remember all the people who were very good modelers, and would you'd see their articles in magazines and lots of photographs of them. So that was a lot of fun, but it was definitely competition. You had to get up early and fly early, otherwise you just it's very hot.
Maybe that's part of the reason why you enjoy free flight. You don't have to have any deal with any dust devils when you fly indoors, right?
That's true.
Just the heating and cooling, maybe if they have that on. I've never told you this, Peter, but I actually competed in indoor free flight as part of the indoor Nats a few years ago, because they had it in Champaign, Illinois, and they had it at a track and field. It's the same site where they used to hold the Hobbyco event, and it was called eFest. It's the same facility, and for 1 year they had the indoor free flight there, and I was so enamored with indoor free flight. I just think it's so cool that you can launch, this super lightweight airplane, and then you can get, several minutes flight in an indoor facility. So they had a class called Pro-Am, and it was, if you'd never ever competed in indoor free flight, you could enter as an amateur, and they would pair you with a pro, and it was kind of a team effort. And so I went and participated, and I actually won the event. So I actually have a Nats plaque where I won the Pro-Am event. But it was largely and thanks to my coach, because I had never done it, but it was such a cool experience. So I can totally relate to how you how you're interested in that, and how neat that is. And I remember the plane wasn't it wasn't turning quite fast enough, and we were worried about hitting the walls. So my coach just kind of snapped the fuselage to get a little bend in it, and then glued it so it wasn't perfectly straight,
right.
And I'd never seen that done before, and I just learned so much, and about how many winds to put on the airplane, and trimming, and it's amazing, really.
You really need help, though. I think if you're a beginner, you really need somebody to help you tweak the plane, the surfaces, because and help with the motor. I didn't know exactly how much when I first started, when I was down in Taft, how much rubber to put on this large model that I had, a Wakefield, and so I got help from people down there. Were just like extremely helpful. You want somebody to help you, just raise your hand and go help, and if somebody comes by and helps you, and they get joy out of that because they're helping you get really good flight, and that's what happened, and that's what happens when you're in a indoor scene like you were in. All the times that I flew at this particular gym, there was most of the time about 7, 8, 10 guys. And if someone was having problems, there's always somebody there to help. We'll try this a little bit, or how about using some amount of lube? And it was fun that way. A lot of camaraderie, and really very little competition. Although there was one fellow who was the president of the group, the Marin Aero Modelers, a guy named Tom Brennan, who was an excellent flyer and a great builder, who wanted to get contests going. And he said, well, you just need a little bit of a challenge. That's all. We can fly for fun, and it's fun anyway. So we would get, for prizes, we'd get some other, guys' kits that he didn't want anymore or whatever. We didn't have trophies. We just had stuff, a packet of balsa wood, whatever, for prizes. But it was a lot of fun. And I met a lot of great flyers and great builders.
So that brings up an interesting question. A lot of times, no matter if it's control line or free flight or any form of RC, some people prefer building, some people prefer flying, and then there's some people that maybe it's equal. How is it for you? Which do you prefer?
I like building. Flying is difficult. I've got so many models that I haven't flown. They're just sitting in boxes waiting for a good field, a good indoor site. But I could keep building. By the way, one of the guys that was in the group for a while was a Thayer Syme.
Oh, yeah.
One of your writers.
Yeah, absolutely. Former editor of Fly RC, and then later Flying Models, and he writes a column for us. Yes.
Great guy. And he was one of those guys that would help. And There's a couple other guys that were really super builders and flyers who went on, I mean, young guys, to be designers. I can't remember the guy's name. It was a David somebody who later went to a Boeing.
Yeah, we have a lot of stories like that. We have a lot of success stories where aero modelers, go from the hobby. I mean, we have an article in the newest issue about the Strata launch, which I'm sure Peter, is the largest airplanes ever flown. And there was a handful of AMA members who worked on the project. So we got the inside story about what they did and their contributions to the project. So yeah, we hear that. In fact, Hoot Gibson, who I mentioned at the beginning of the show, 5-time astronaut. Hoot Gibson is the gentleman who shook hands with the Russian cosmonaut when they docked, and the president at the time said that was the end of the Cold War. I mean, he tells everybody that he doesn't know if he would have became a pilot and astronaut if he wouldn't have gotten involved in aero modeling.
Yeah.
And it's really great that it leads to that. And so one of the things I'm curious to hear from you, because you probably know that my father owned a hobby shop when I was growing up, and I've actually worked in 2 different hobby shops, and you also worked in a hobby shop in the 70s. And I'm curious what your experiences were, with that.
Well, I worked part-time because I was part-time school assistant teacher for first grade, for about 3 years. So I had my afternoons free. And so I worked at a Gunnings Hobbies in San Anselmo, maybe like 3 days a week, something like that, just to help out. And that was kind of fun. It is being a salesman. It's a little bit of a different kind of thing. But the woman who owned the store, or her and her husband, she was pretty informative, but it was her husband, Walt Gunning, who was a very good modeler, and he would always be out at the RC field. And so whatever kit that was sold that was RC, his wife would tell the builder, finish building and bring it out to the field, and my husband will help try to get it together, trim it out, and fly it. And they sold, of course, radios there and everything. They had model railroading stuff and all sorts of different kinds of hobbies. But Walt was an excellent flyer, an excellent teacher. His son was the model railroad guy. People would bring in their trains and he would fix them. And I wouldn't do any of that. I just basically hid behind the counter and tried to give some sort of advice, to young people mostly. Later, after that job, I got an opening. There was an opening at a business called AMSI, Architectural Model Supplies Incorporated. And it was a company that had broken off from a mother company. A mother company of architectural models in San Francisco built a lot of models for architects, usually for stuff in the Bay Area, but also for outside of the Bay Area, like huge malls in Thailand, a shopping complex in Washington, D.C. So there was 2 ladies that were partners, and they took the accessory business and moved it to San Rafael, which was close to where I lived. And I worked there as first as just a worker in making colored foam. We would take latex foam and we'd grind it, and then we'd color it in these big drums with a paint, kind of a dye. And then we dry it out in these dryers and grind it up. And it was used in architectural models for tree foliage, for grass, for hedges, all sorts of things. And my wife also worked there. She made the little trees. It was one of the only companies that made palm trees out of natural, we could call it natural product. It was seaweed.
Oh,
that was the secret. Don't tell anybody. That's what the lady said. Don't tell anybody. Don't tell where we got it. I know exactly which beach to get this particular kind of seaweed at. If anybody wants to know. But anyway, so that was one of the things that I did there was in the manufacturing aspect. And then I did shipping and receiving, and then later became a kind of a I guess promo guy. Would go out on the road and show off our products. A lot of our foam products were like Woodland Scenics.
Oh yeah.
Ours were the greens were like all sorts of different colors of greens, not just bright green, or fall colors. It was all sorts of different things for these particular. I mean, these let's see, how do you call it? Picky architectural modelers. They were always wanting to, no, that's just not the right color. Just a little bit more yellow in there, please. Okay. So we'd have to satisfy them, and we had a rack that we tried to sell to hobby stores. So that's one of the things that I did, was to go around to hobby stores to try to get an AMSI rack. We had all this foam, and we had steel wool that we would paint, that we use on these armatures for trees. I also die cast. I was the metal guy. We'd make little cars, little people, besides the little trees, big trees, whatever. So that was very interesting, learning how to use a Regala machine.
Well, so
after that, then I got more into music, and they allowed me to go out on the road and play with different bands. So in the late 70s, I played with Country Joe and the Fish.
Mm-hmm.
Big Brother had stopped playing in 72. Although we did one show in 78, but I was working with Country Joe and Barry Melton at the time, and did a lot of shows, and then kind of just laid low for a while there, and didn't get back into rock and roll until the early 80s with Barry Melton and the Dinosaurs. And that lasted until about 88. And during that time, in 89, then I started working for a record distributor. And, various times I would be able to work a lot on models, and other times, even for a period of like 15 years when I was in a condo, there was just no room to work. So I kind of had to, I even gave up my AMA number for a while there, for about 15 years. I had to re-up later on.
Well, we certainly appreciate that, and we certainly appreciate you being a member. So I had talked about some musicians who are also modelers at the very beginning of the show, and I was curious, do you know musicians or modelers, or did you introduce any musicians to modeling at any time?
Not really introduced, but I did know a few. You had an article, a bio, I guess, on Bobby Keys.
Yes.
Passed away, a sax player who was into RC. Another musician that I know that I'm still communicating with is Taj Mahal. His brother got him into like 1/4 scale.
Oh,
scale, yeah, large stuff.
I like his music. You'll have to ask him if he would be interested in being interviewed.
Okay, I'll ask him. I don't think he's building anything now, and then like I said before, Pigpen was a really good builder. I came over to his house one time with this World War I Spad. I mean, I saw that he had a finished model there of something that looked odd to me, because I really hadn't seen many gliders, and it was a Sinbad.
Oh yeah,
I think it was a Jetco. I can't remember the name of the company that produced it. And I looked at this model, and it was beautifully built, beautifully covered. And I said, "Well, what are you going to do with it? I don't see any rubber motor on it or anything. What are you going to do with this thing?" He says, "I'm just going to go up to the top of a hill, and I'm going to throw it off the hill." I say, "Well, you don't have any controls." He says, "Too bad. I'm just going to throw it." I don't know whatever happened to the glider, but it was beautifully built.
Right. Well, let's delve a little bit into your rock and roll past, and from the beginning. So you mentioned you were playing guitar, and I know it was your guitar playing that kind of led to you getting together with some people that would later become Big Brother and the Holding Company. So what drew you to the guitar? Why did you start playing guitar?
Well, gosh, a lot of kids were playing guitars at the time, teenagers but it was basically knowing how to play ukulele. I just translated a lot of chords and stuff that I knew ukulele to the guitar. And I had a guitar teacher, instructor, and my brother, who didn't have a guitar, would take my guitar because he was 4 years older and much taller than me, and say, "I want to try to play this thing," And he started playing really good. Started finger picking, and really got me into actually getting better. And when we got into the folk music thing, I played flat picking style with a lot of bass runs. So I was very familiar with bass runs when I started realizing that people that were coming over to this house that I lived at in San Francisco, wanting to jam, didn't have a bass player. So, I got a cheap Japanese bass and just started plunking out what I kind of knew from the bass runs that I had learned playing bluegrass music. And it seemed to work pretty well with some of the simple rock and roll songs.
What was your first guitar? Do you remember?
It was a Stella.
Oh.
One of the cheapest guitars you can find. And I think I got it at a pawn shop for like $15.
Wow.
This is like 1958 or 57.
Right.
And I quickly changed it, turned it. I took off the metal plate at the bottom that held the strings, and I put a bridge on and took off all the stupid painting that it had on it, and made it a clear head. I mean, yeah. Anyway, it looks like I'm trying to make it look like a Martin guitar.
Okay. So
it sounded terrible. So later, we got a couple of old guitars from pawn shops. We got this Gibson Jumbo, which was really a great guitar. One of the ones that was stolen, but I played that a lot. And then later, I played this Triple Aught 18, which was okay. But then by that time, I was getting into playing rock and roll bass. And like I said, the first one was a Japanese bass. The second one I bought from a guy from an English fella named Bearden, a single cutaway Hofner bass.
Oh.
Which fed back like a mother. It was just like you turn it around and go, woo, So I eventually got an EBO, a Gibson.
Yes.
Which is what you'll see me playing on the Monterey film footage.
It's basically a SG style bass.
Yeah. It really was easy to play. It had good pickups, a great sound, but it didn't have a lot of punch. So I later when Big Brother signed with Columbia was CBS, and CBS owned Fender. We got a chance to go to the Fender company in I think it's Fullerton, down south, and pick our instruments. And the equipment. So we got all of us got dual Showman amps. I don't know what David got as far as drums, but there's an associate company that was with Fender that had drums. And we got Showman heads, which I still have. I have a rare 1968 Showman head that probably almost works. I haven't tried it in many years. I did take the cobwebs out of it and whatever, but
practice with it.
I do practice with it once in a while. But and a twin, what do you call it? Princeton. Everybody in the band got a Princeton amp.
Oh, wow.
Except for the singer and the drummer, and they don't need those things. So that was like our practice amps, and I've still got that, and I use that to practice with in my model room.
Nice.
Yeah, it's a very crowded little room. Instruments and airplanes.
Right. So who, early on, either be it guitar or bass, who were you influenced by? Who was there anybody you wanted to emulate, or is there people that you really appreciated?
That's a good question. I don't have any particular person that I listen to. I just listen to a lot of rock and roll lines. Yeah, who? I don't know. Just a lot of the bands that in the Bay Area, we seem to like go back and forth listening to each other,
Right.
Excuse me. And it was a lot of fun picking up stuff. I mean, I even went over to Jack Hassey's house one time because the bandmate said, you ought to get better playing bass. Why don't you go take a lesson from Jack? So I went over to Jack's house, and he said, well, let's just play together, So we played something, and he says, you don't need lessons. You're fine. Just keep doing what you're doing. And everybody in the Bay Area, every bass player plays differently.
Right.
Some played like session guys, some played like folk bass players, and that's kind of like where I came from. So I played a little bit like that, a little more majors instead of sevenths and stuff. But I did play blues. That was easy for me to do because I played blues with Big Ben and lots of other folks, and it was easy to do. So finally, when we signed with CBS and got the Fender stuff, I got a Fender jazz bass, and that's the one that's in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame.
With an interesting paint job.
With a very interesting paint job, yeah. There's a couple of photos of it before it was painted, and that was when we played at the Fillmore in Fillmore East in New York. But shortly thereafter, because the painter, the artist, was in New York working for this Pantone company, a display company, and she was a very good artist. I could do all sorts of wonderful things. So she painted, and then I guess maybe a couple other gigs that were in the East Coast. There's pictures of me playing it with it then. And unfortunately, the back, which is beautiful butterfly, was kind of scratched up and ruined by my belts.
Yeah.
Yeah, that happens.
Did you have a graphic in mind, or did you just give her the bass and say, paint whatever you want on it, or how did that come about?
Yeah, I said, you're creative, do whatever you want to do.
Right.
So if you don't have a picture of it.
Well, we don't have one to put up right at the moment, but I did look at a picture of it yesterday, and I've been in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. So if you do a search, you can find it, and it's a very interestingly painted bass.
It's
for
got
sure.
like skulls with rainbows coming out of it.
Right.
Yeah.
So I asked you this in the past, but I'm guessing people that are watching would be interested. So talking about Big Brother and the holding company, where'd the name come from?
It just came from a couple of lists. We started making lists of different weird sounding names, and one list was the holding company, and the other list was Big Brother, and we just put them together. But there are things like Mogan, David, and the Grapes, Chili and the Sauces, whatever, funny, weird names. So there was a lot of those kind of names that were put together. So Sop with Camel, Jefferson Airplane, Grateful Dead, Quicksilver Messenger Service, Country Joe and the Fish, a lot of funny kind of names, so we wanted to be funny.
Well, it sounds like it worked out perfectly. And then, when you formed Big Brother and the holding company, there was no Janis Joplin at that point. So how did Janis Joplin come into the band?
Well, I had heard her during the folk music days. She had come out from Texas to San Francisco, I think in 63 and 64, I think she was here for a short time. So I heard her at a radio show called Midnight Special on KPFA, a Pacifica station. And Chet Helms was the one that had brought her out in 63. I guess they hitchhiked all the way from Texas to San Francisco. And actually, she didn't do so well in the Bay Area. She had some abuse problems, some drug stuff happening. And So her friends actually got her on the bus with a one-way ticket. Go back to Texas and clean up, which she did, But Chet brought her up when we were looking for a female vocalist. Because a lot of bands in San Francisco had female vocalists. We didn't want to be left out. We wanted to have a nice, good-looking gal in front of the band. So he said, "How about Janis Joplin?" And I said, "Oh, I remember that girl. She has a very loud voice. I think that she could be heard over us, maybe." So he sent for her, and a friend brought her from Texas and came to one of our rehearsals, and it was like an instant find. It was a match, made in a garage, I guess. That's where we were rehearsing, but she was very loud, and she could sing over us almost because we had a very poor PA system at the time. And so we said, "Well, okay, you're hired. We have a gig next weekend at the Avalon. Let's rehearse these songs." So just started going over material, and she brought in a couple of songs. We brought her a couple of songs that we thought that she could sing better than me, because I was doing a lot of the lead vocals, and it worked out. At the first, I would say, month, she was doing maybe 40% of the singing of the leads and a lot of background vocals. So yeah, it worked out.
Well, obviously, for
needless to say, it worked out too well, too good.
Well, obviously, for many of the people that are watching, myself included, the only way we know Janis is from watching, interviews, like if she was on the Dick Cavett show, for example, or watching, concert footage or behind the scenes footage. So obviously, you recorded with her, you toured with her. How would you describe her? What was Janis Joplin like?
I always get that question, and I hate that question, but that's okay. She was like anybody, who has moods, who has different interests, changeables. She could be very, very funny, and then very obnoxious. She could be a really great singer, but I had her sing sharp and flat. She could be very intellectual, come from like left field with some of these arguments that she would have. She was very well educated, and I think that she was definitely an artist. She did some painting, which was okay, but she was an artist. She really wanted to get into the music and deliver it the proper way. What do these lyrics mean, and how can I get them out to the audience? How can I make the audience feel these words that I'm singing? She was very good at that. Was it difficult working with her at times? Yeah. And other times it was a piece of cake. She was so good. So, yeah, she's just like a lot of people, just lots of different things happening, lots of things going on, lots of ups and downs, and the goods, the bads, the uglies, the real good looking, She was funny. That's a lot of people forget. She was a funny broad, as they say.
So Monterey Pop Festival, let's talk a little bit about that. That was a big, big thing for Big Brother and the Holding Company, and a huge concert. When you knew that you were going to do the gig, the Monterey Pop Festival, was there anybody specifically that you were excited, Peter, to either meet or share the stage with, or was there fellow musicians that you were really excited to perform with?
Yeah, Otis Redding.
Okay, yeah.
And I hadn't heard much about Jimi Hendrix. I didn't know who he was. I kind of knew who the Who were. I knew Lou Rawls. I liked him, and I knew, but I hadn't heard them before. Simon and Garfunkel. Who else? Well, there's a lot of people there that I didn't know that I was looking forward to seeing, and of course, I was really kind of like cheering on our San Francisco groups that played during Saturday afternoon show.
Right, because let's see, I have a list of everyone. I'll just hit. You mentioned Lou Rawls, Simon and Garfunkel. I'll just name a few: Booker T and the MGs, Country Joe and the Fish, which you mentioned playing with, Jefferson Airplane, Otis Redding, Steve Miller Band, the Byrds, Buffalo Springfield, Grateful Dead, obviously Jimi Hendrix, the Mamas and the Papas, the Who. I mean, a lot of big names.
And Ravi Shankar.
Yes, yes.
Yeah.
So obviously one of the biggest takeaways from that show for Big Brother is I think you got signed shortly after that. Is that right?
We had been signed to a contract with Mainstream Records, and it actually kind of, the show was really good for us because Clive Davis was there from Columbia, from CBS. And he started then talking to Mainstream, trying to buy out the contract that they had with us. So that was set into action. And we hadn't been filmed because our manager didn't want us to sign anything. They wanted us to sign a release while we were walking up the stairs to the stage. We said, no, we don't do that. Yet we have to sit down and take a look at the contract and maybe even have our lawyer take a look at it. They said, well, don't you want to be on TV? And yeah, it's fine, but you don't do it that way. So, basically the cameramen were filming everybody. They were told to put down their cameras, face them to the ground with this act, and other bands said the same thing. Quicksilver Messenger Service manager said, put the cameras down. The Grateful Dead management said, don't film these people because you're trying to make us sign something that we have no idea all the details. It's just not the way to do it. So after we did our show on Saturday afternoon, then we get all these people saying, you weren't filmed? Oh my God, you should be in this movie, blah, 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 So, and they were twisting Janis's ear, saying, what, you gotta talk to your guys, and she said, well, who should I talk to? And talk to Grossman. So Albert Grossman's there. So he puts a pitch, said, oh yeah, you've got to do this movie, and you can always work out things later with a contract. Yeah, sure. So we agreed to do a couple of songs on Sunday in the evening after Ravi Shankar and before Jimi Hendrix as an encore. So that was filmed. That was what's filmed.
Was the Monterey Pop Festival the biggest gig you'd ever done to that point?
Yeah, huge.
Right. Were you or do you recall, was the band nervous or not? Were you ready? Was this your chance?
Well, we had played some big shows, not bigger than this one, but we had played some. We were ready. We weren't nervous, but they only allowed us to play, I think, 4 or 5 songs on Saturday and then just 2 songs on Sunday. Wasn't much, so yeah.
Right.
When you have to do like a set of 90 minutes, then you start getting a little bit nervous because you have to get the right songs and put them in the right order. But just a short set of like 5 songs, that's a piece of cake.
So another interesting that transpired at the Monterey Pop Festival was a discussion between Jimi Hendrix and Pete Townsend on who was going to go on first, because from my understanding, they didn't want to follow each other.
That was funny. Yeah, we were in the back room, ready to go on, in the dressing room area backstage, and here are these guys that are arguing. Who were saying, Jimmy, we're not going to try to follow you. Forget it. We're going to go on after, before you. And he said, no, you're the big act. You have to go on last, And so they flipped the coin to see who would go on last, I guess it was, who had to go on second or after the other. So it was decided that who would go on first, and then the Grateful Dead would go in between them, and then Jimi Hendrix would go on. And then the Mamas and Papas. So it was so funny to see these guys arguing, though. No, you, no, you go on. I can't go.
Well, so then I think one of the reasons Jimmy burned his guitar was because the Who was known for trashing their equipment. So I'm assuming he felt he needed to, step that up a little bit or do something different. Was there, to your knowledge, did anyone know he was going to burn his guitar?
Not that I heard at that time or even after. No one knew he was going to do that.
So I have a little prop here that I'll share with everybody. I'm a big Jimi Hendrix fan, and so this is a Funko Pop of Jimmy, and here's his guitar that
On fire.
Monterey. And you also can't see it, but right outside the room in my hallway, I actually have a painting of Jimmy from Monterey.
Oh.
So what was it like, Peter, to experience Jimmy? You said you didn't really know much about him, so you got to see him play, and then you see him burn and smash his guitar. I mean, what was that like? How did you?
I guess I was of the same feeling of a lot of people in the audience, like, what? He's burning his guitar? But when I later look at the footage, he switches guitars.
Right.
Look at that. So yeah, it's not, he's not burning up his favorite guitar. He's burning up something that's anyway.
Well, that makes a good point.
I don't know what it was. I think it was
Stella.
I think it was a Stella. Yeah. It was probably a clone Fender. That's what I'm thinking. I don't know. I have to look at it again more closely.
Well, it brings up an interesting point. I just read an article just like 2 days ago. Roger Daltrey was talking about Pete Townsend smashing guitars, and he said that they would re-glue the guitar and smash it again so that they didn't have to waste so many guitars. So as long as the neck didn't break, he said they would re-glue it between the gigs, and he'd smash the exact same guitar again. I never knew that.
I never heard that one before, but I can believe it.
It's I saw it on Guitar World like 2 days ago. So, interesting point as you made about Hendrix.
Yeah,
so of all the shows you've played, would that be your favorite? Was Monterey your favorite, or what show was your favorite?
That's got to be the biggest one that we did. We played a lot of larger venues. We played one in Philadelphia. What's it? The Spectrum.
Okay.
Where it's in the round kind of thing. The stage is rotating. We also played, I think, a couple of places like that, other places in the East Coast. I can't remember the names. And of course, Fillmore East, was a big venue. And that was usually, we played that twice, I believe, and that was very enjoyable, a lot of fun. We played on the same bill with Albert King and Tim Buckley the first time, and the second time was with, I believe, the Staple Singers. And for sure, because we went on stage and backed them up doing down by the Riverside, where Janis and Mavis Staples sang together. And that was a lot of fun. And we played a lot with the on the same bill with the Butterfield Blues Band, and sometimes they jam with us, and with Country Joe, and sometimes with a lot of times with Quicksilver and the Dead. That was, those shows were fun. I can almost remember them.
So when I interviewed you back in January of 2017, or that's when we published the article, yeah. I asked you, looking back at your musical career, what are you most proud of? And one of the things you mentioned was recording the Cheap Thrills album. So is that your favorite album of all the albums that you did with Big Brother?
Well, after a while, other things started coming out from Sony, particularly one called Live at Winterland. And that's one of our better records. And that was a live recording done for the Cheap Thrills. And it wasn't used. I think maybe one song, Ball and Chain, was used on the Cheap Thrills. But that's what we were trying to do with Cheap Thrills, was come out with a really good live album. And so I would recommend that to anybody who likes the band and likes Janis to go out and get a copy of Live at Winterland. It's hard to find, but it's out there on CD.
Awesome. So let's see, what do I have here after that? I have, do you have a favorite Big Brother and the Holding Company song? Is there a favorite song for you?
The easier ones.
That's a good answer.
Down on Me. That's one of the easiest ones to play. And it usually opens our set. And that was from the first record, from the mainstream record. I like the mainstream record quite a bit, actually more than the Cheap Thrills record, because it was pretty much of a live recording in a studio. Janis did double her vocal, but the producers stopped at the 12th take. We'd only do 12 takes. It said 13. Yeah, no. We don't go 13. No, that's bad. We just stopped. So we had to accept some of the songs that weren't really that well recorded or well played. Let's put it that way. That were in one of those 12 takes. So, but I liked her voice. I liked Janis's voice in those songs. Bye Bye Baby is one of my favorite. And it's a really good song. I'm surprised that more people don't do it. Blind Man, I did that one, and that was her first single. That maybe got to, I want to say, 85 in the top 40 list in Muncie, Indiana. Maybe.
Possibly. I didn't live in Muncie, Indiana at the time. In fact, I don't want to date myself, but I wasn't born when that came out. So you wrote at least one of the songs off the first album. Did you have a lot of involvement in the songwriting process?
Not really. I've only written a couple of songs, Caterpillar Song and the Light is Faster Than Sound, and then I did some words for Blind Man, but that's about it. I really didn't do too much.
Another one you had your name on with Janis.
Yeah. We did a couple of albums that were without Janis after she left the group. And some of those are pretty good. I mean, the albums are good, but they're real eclectic. There's all over the place with different types of songs, hard rock and melodic and background music songs, and funny stuff. So, but anybody can find almost anything on YouTube. Just look up Big Brother and the Holding Company, and it's there.
Right. And you, if I'm not mistaken, after she officially left the band, you still did a few gigs with her, right?
We did. I think when she officially left the band, we did one last gig with her at the Avalon, I believe. And then we did one gig at the Carousel Ballroom, or Fillmore West, it was called then. And she got up on stage and did a song with Nick Ravenitis, it was called Ego Rock. And that was, I believe, recorded. It's on one of the many albums that are compiled albums. Compilation albums.
Were there ever, after she left Big Brother up until her unfortunate passing, was there ever any talk of her rejoining the band?
No, because she didn't want to. I mean, we didn't try to get her back in the band. She really wanted to do her own thing. Arrangements, and I think the last band that she had, the Full Tilt Boogie Band, was probably the best band, including ourselves, that she was with. It had two really good keyboard players and a great guitar player, John Till, good bass player, Brad Campbell, and did some great songs. But anyway, one of the songs on the Pearl album that they finished as an instrumental was Buried Alive in the Blues. And we did that song. We recorded that after her death on the How Hard It Is record that we did. That's our last big album with Columbia. And we had Nick Ravenitis, who wrote it, sing it after we tried to get Mike Finnegan, who was playing with us at the time, sing it, because he did a great version of it. And it's out there someplace in the can, someplace. Best version of that song ever. It's a great song. Great song.
So for those that don't know, I mean, obviously you've been sidelined somewhat due to the pandemic with COVID-19, but you still perform with a Big Brother and the Holding Company, and Dave Getz, the drummer, is fairly original to the band. And so tell everybody where they can find out more about Big Brother, and once things get better, how would they find out about upcoming shows and just follow the band?
Well, social media is the way. Facebook, we have a Facebook page. We have our own website, bbhc.com. You can get not only information about upcoming gigs, if there are any soon, but also merchandise. We have T-shirts, and the concert that we just did, which was a live show at a club in Fairfax, California. It was live streaming, but it's available now online. Just go to musee.com and you can find out how to get the link. I think it's $5 or something like that. Not very much money.
It's still on Facebook too.
And I think that information is on Facebook too. So
yeah. And that show you just did last Saturday, and it was kind of a VR show. And you were telling me beforehand that it was a little bit challenging because you were just using monitors. And I'm guessing there was no audience either, right? So there was no audience to get excited with, with the music.
About 20 people. Some people were wandering in and out of the place, because it's supposed to be closed, but the door was open. People just kind of wander in and go, "What's going on?" "Oh, we're recording the show, but we're really closed. Leave." Wait a minute. If I buy a drink, can I stay? Oh, okay, sure.
Closed.
But we're closed.
Right.
But it was fun.
Well, I'm sure it's challenging in a way to play a show with no audience or a little audience, because I think the band gets excited about that, right? The audience getting excited, and so I'm sure that brought some challenges. Oh, we have a free flight model. It looks like a Piper Cub.
It's a Piper Cub that's just flying on by me. I don't know what the heck's going on here. Hey, woo! Taking a dive.
Moving up.
Anyway, yeah, that's the kind of thing I do. J3, where are you? With a little bit of dehedral, make it fly better. So yeah, I'm still kind of doing a lot of modeling here at home, and hoping for some live gigs, outside gigs like the drive-in type things that have happened. We'd love to play, and these streaming things, I don't know. I've seen a couple of them. Some of them work well, but you really I need an audience. I need to play to somebody.
I'm sure that really helps. Well, we really appreciate you taking the time to talk to us today. We're about out of time, but it's always a pleasure, Peter, to chat with you about music. And I feel so fortunate that you reached out to me after I wrote the Modelers and Musicians article, and you've shared some really cool Hendrix stories with me, and it's just been enjoyable to hear about your modeling experience and your music experience. And today I have to tell you, like from the point I was eating lunch up to our interview, I was listening to nothing but Big Brother and the Holding Company. And, I just got really excited about the interview. And I thought to myself, this must be how the band feels when they're backstage and they're ready to come out and go on stage. That's how I felt. Like I was so excited listening to the music for a couple hours before this interview and talk to you, about what was involved. So thank you so much for, spending the time with us. And
it's my pleasure, Jay. Yeah, I like talking about music and models.
They're both great hobbies, and I'm fortunate to have both, and you're fortunate to have both. And Matt, that's helping us, Matt Ruddick, he's fortunate to have both. So
all those guys in the magazine who play, you guys got to have a mag band. The mag band.
There you go.
The mag band. Come on.
We might need to do that. So, well, thank you so much, and I hope that you'll be able to get back out to playing gigs soon. And I would encourage everybody to check out your website and follow the band, and hopefully see you play sometime in the future.
Yeah, well, it's great talking to you, and great talking to people out there in aviation land.
All right, take care.
Take care. Bye-bye.